Or injury of your life.
Nothing.
I'm gonna try to fix a few things. If you're watching this video, take your time, fast forward, do whatever. Do what you gotta do, man.
Oh, you haven't done.
Understand why it's no longer attached.
Oh, they took the extender, whatever.
Yeah, because it
No, I think they must say it locks on.
because it runs through.
Let's see.
Oh wait, maybe it's over here. Got it.
Oh, what in the world?
So that guy's connected there, and there's another connection.
So now it should be. Now I should be able to change the Yeah.
Wait, that one gets connected to that cable, and that gets connected to.
So I already had the.
Oh,
There's one that goes through this
Oh, okay.
central thing.
There it is.
Here we are in the control room. T minus, we'll call it 2 minutes to lift off. Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi is somewhere out there.
I see him.
Mr. Yoda can't join us. Here's Obi-Wan.
Say hi.
We're broadcasting to no one.
All right. Perfect.
Oh, damn. So, I was thinking how he had it before. It was in English. He would have it this one. Yeah. When it was in English, he had the England and the English flag.
Yeah.
And it said English. I don't
Yeah.
remember how it was. But instead, I
but I'm
changed the
confused.
code, revert that. So the user, if it's in English, if the user speaks Spanish, then they look
Okay,
at this
you're
and
about
it
to
says speak for Spanish.
Chapter 7.
When you do that,
Oh, I mean,
It gets a little
Right.
and
confusing.
in reverse, if
Like,
it's
it jumps
Spanish,
around
you can
when
see,
he starts
oh,
talking.
here's the
We'll learn about this in chapter
maybe I can reward it.
I don't think it'd be that bad.
Reward it.
9. Just a parade.
I think
But I
that's good.
think
You
I
could
got
probably
a good
even take
idea
off
of why
version
you
and
use
click here
params.
for English. Probably.
What do you mean, params?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he starts.
Maybe
Let
it's where
me see here. He started applying params.
Oh, because
Hopefully that's it. Before he was in English, he had
English up there.
only English and the flag. So I thought this was probably
Yeah,
easier, right?
yeah. That's funny that you were working on it because that was one thing I was asking Fernando to fix.
And I worked on
the-
it because you told me.
yeah, we
Oh,
talked
wait,
about
that
it.
too.
Yeah. Speaking of Fernando, he should be joining
Uh-huh.
from HQ Raleigh, and then
Who's Ramiro?
so yeah, Ramiro is not going to join from there today because he's had another he had a work meeting tonight, and then so Christopher, who normally joins from there, is sick, and Alberto is in Mexico right now.
Alberto?
Yeah, man.
I'm playing catch up, so you guys will definitely see me fumbling around if we're asking very specific questions about what's going on in here. Because just at the start of chapter 7,
Okay.
right
Yeah,
now.
I think we're all in different spots. Are you on 6 right now?
Yeah, 6.2.
Yeah, so Jorge's like a third of the way through 6. I'm about halfway through 7. I neglected my infant child this weekend and caught up a little.
I powered through
Oh, wait,
6.
I'm on broadcast. I mean, I spent quality daddy time.
Yeah,
Might have cropped that out.
Yeah.
I powered through 6
Ramiro,
this
when
afternoon.
you're watching this, edit.
So,
You did 6. Okay.
yeah. I came here a little, you saw me. I came here and
Yeah.
powered through 6 this afternoon. So
Yeah.
no,
What Jared means is he spent time with his loving wife.
she called me. She knew, she was like, are you just heading straight there? I was like, yes. a quick stop at Moe's.
Gotta make time for Moe's.
Let's see. I guess we'll wait another couple minutes because I specifically talked to Fernando about joining. Yeah, see if you can join it because that's weird.
I am.
Christopher just said you're not in a call. Oh yeah, you see you were able to join. Echo.
I got my mic muted. So it's just my speakers. There we go. I think we're good now. Then they just yell at me all the time like it doesn't when my dogs bark. And it's like, do you want to unmute? It looks like you're talking.
Yeah,
No.
we should be. Yeah, once anyone else joins, we should be getting volume through
There it
the.
is. Someone.
All right.
Hello?
Ooh.
Ah, Christopher. Yeah, so it's still just missing Fernando. So we're just waiting a couple more minutes till we see if Fernando and anybody else at HQ Raleigh can join us.
No.
I thought
Computer
that
makes
was
that new noise a lot.
Mine.
Mine is always making that noise because it barely.
I thought it was mine did it for the first time today. I thought I blew it up or something. I was like, what?
Oh,
Mine
yeah,
does it
it's
when
weird to hear.
I have like 5 big apps running at
Yeah.
once. Like if I'm trying to
Like,
run like pages and
Tabs, apps.
I got scared at work and just closed it up. It's like, hold up. Wait for it to stop. I had never heard it do it before today.
Oh wait, yeah. Sometimes it does that when it's trying to like index everything. So
Mhm.
when you use Spotlight, you can find it quick. So it's kind of like doing something.
I was just confused. I was like, what? It's about to
We
blow
did
up.
that. Did you update it or something?
I was just working on the tutorial.
Oh,
You've never really stressed your computer before.
Oh, I stretched it out today. I got scared several times. Like, oh man. But luckily, I have a work Mac too, so I just use that one. I was like, this one's not doing it. I try to come back to this, start working again. Gotta cool down. Had to Google what was going on. I was so scared.
Well,
I guess no one's in Raleigh. Everyone stayed up late watching the Cavs game.
Yeah.
did you guys care who won?
Oh yeah, I care.
Who were you cheering for?
I sent some text messages after that game.
Are you happy?
I take it. You.
Yeah. Yeah. All the LeBron haters and doubters.
I was actually.
I really just wanted him to win one for Cleveland.
Yeah, me too. I actually was cheering. I like a lot of the guys in Golden State, and I was cheering for them to break the record throughout the season.
Yeah, I wanted that. I definitely wanted that.
But I was cheering for Cleveland to win this series. I just wish they hadn't. I just wish Green hadn't been held out of that one game because now everyone's like, who
he's
knows?
been like low chopping everybody. Like they showed like
Yeah.
still pictures of him. He's hit like a lot of people.
Part of me, I mean, I'm a big LeBron fan, but part of me, I'm not like too big into the vigilante. You should be able to do whatever you want, but if you purposely step over a man who's down on the court, you were making a statement. I mean, he shouldn't hit you in the nuts.
They got like still pictures of him coming down to rebound and just kick his leg out of under somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I was rooting for Golden State, but
And Steph Curry threw his mouthpiece and hit a kid.
did he?
Yeah.
Well, not
It was
last
the
night
before.
in game 6.
Was it?
Yeah, he got thrown out.
It does raise some interesting questions about like clearly the size of the object you throw into the stands matters because had he thrown just about anything else, like a ball or certainly anything larger than a mouthpiece, how do you not suspend him? I mean, that's it's not that far from going into the stands and like punching somebody.
Right.
You should see the memes of people with like the neck braces. And they said I would have showed it to my lawyer like this saying he hit me in the neck with his mouthpiece.
Yeah.
He'll lose some of his nice guy persona from some of that. But
That was the crazy part. It was Steph Curry, he's not supposed to.
yeah, exactly right.
And his wife went on Twitter saying the NBA was rigged.
Yeah, I heard that.
It was crazy. Like, what? But he made her take it down.
I heard she was ranting like that.
Yeah, he joked about the interview. He said he's gonna cut off the Wi-Fi at his house.
You know, they just sort of collapsed in the playoffs.
It
What
was
can you
crazy.
say?
It was a nail biter. I was like, oh man, what's going on?
You know, they're not. They're gonna have the best record for the regular season and not won the championship. That's so rough. They'll never be compared against the Bulls. You know.
The memes last night. I had to go to sleep. I kept last night. Like they had one with the Bulls. It was like Scottie Pippen talking about the Jordan. He was like, I think he said something like, 73 and 10 is. We said 73 and 9 is cool, but I think it was 72 and 10 has a better ring to it. That was a joke. They did all that and didn't get the ring, which is crazy.
Yeah, and the fact that Golden State lost. You guys, I wasn't listening for a second, but Golden State lost as many games during the playoffs as they did during the. I mean, you would expect a worse percentage during the playoffs because you're playing the best teams.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Then it was at their home at home place. That was crazy. They lost at home.
Yeah. Curry just never. I mean, after he was out a few games, it never seemed like he came back the same.
well, except that one game, except his
Yeah.
first game back,
Mhm.
where he seemed like he was a god. He was unstoppable.
Right. But yeah, you look at his actual stats and stuff after coming back,
Oh yeah.
they're
Nowhere near his regular self.
nowhere near. Yeah, I don't think he was fully back. I'm not taking away the championship at all, right? I think, hey, Cleveland won that thing amazing, but
Guess it's just us.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not sure what's going on. Hopefully, people aren't just sitting there wondering. But yeah, they're not on Slack, so hopefully we're okay. So let's go. I guess let's go ahead and get started. So I don't know. So actually, we already know where everybody is, right? So Rondell, you're on 8. I'm on 7. Jorge's on 6, and Jedi Master Obi-Wan is on 6, but he's in another plane.
well, just at 7.
Ah,
Just started at 7.
Gotcha. So here's my suggestion. So what we've been doing is we've been going and answering individual questions at the beginning, and then going through a topic in a little bit more detail, or going through part of a lesson in more detail. After that, I have a few questions that are of varying specificity, some that are just ridiculously specific, that may be so Rails specific that Jared, you might not know what it is. But and then I was thinking about, I know for me, one thing that is, overall, I think this tutorial is great and is really helpful. One thing that for me makes it more difficult is the fact that I have hardly any background in CSS and HTML. And so there were a couple of things that I thought, for me, it would be helpful if you could walk us through. There's a couple of parts I could show you that are just
Sure.
where it's just implementing. We've talked about some of the new ideas we've talked about so far are where CSS files, the layout files, live in a Rails app, and so Ramiro spent some time going over that, but we haven't spent any time recently going back over like how how CSS works and the actual structure of what's in one of those files.
Right.
I know that's something that you're
Yeah.
fairly familiar with. Did you guys have any specific questions right now? Anything that you'd come
More
up
so in 7. Well, we're talking about 7, or we're doing 6 right now.
Well,
6? Yeah, 6 or 7.
I'll see what I can help out with. Yeah.
Like I was telling you, it's more so just the params, kind of a better idea how that works.
Right. It's the params issue. So I'm not familiar with what this is yet in Rails. I was trying to get there.
Yeah, maybe we can
We go ahead.
put that off to. We can have that be a Ramiro question next time, because
Gotcha.
I am also. I mean, how it's being used so far, it doesn't seem super confusing, but I still could, if you ask me what it is, I still don't fully understand at all. Don't begin to understand.
Damn, that stuck's going to 6 too.
What, hey, did you have anything?
Not in chapter 5. Chapter 6.
Not so far.
Not yet. No, I mean, I think the only thing is they changed from HTML to ERB, or like the
Right.
Rails HTML version of HTML. It's we use a bunch of different stuff. Like on HTML, if you wanna, like, let's say on email, if you wanna require an email, you just put required, right?
Mhm.
On HTML, on a form, maybe.
You have the example.
Uh,
You can't. I mean, so there's different.
because let's see, because Rails use a different thing. Like they use those keys, or what is it called again? Where you have email,
Symbol.
The validate.
a symbol, or validation symbols. Yeah, symbol. They use symbols on ERBs, right?
Okay.
Instead of regular HTML tags or HTML. Like when you put class
Right.
on ERB, you use column class and that's rocket.
Does Melanie?
I feel like. Let me see.
If you can point me to the area you're
Yeah,
talking about.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, one thing that he does that seems both helpful but also complicated maybe complicated in different ways for like Jorge, you may be much more familiar with HTML than I am, but one thing he does in chapter 7 is he actually goes through as he's creating the sign up form, and he shows you you go ahead and you input the code to create the form, which is primarily all done using embedded Ruby. But then he goes through and walks you through
The same.
he goes through, so he goes and has you look at it in the browser, and then you look to see what HTML it generated.
What? Yeah.
Which is, which would, I assume, is particularly helpful if you are somewhat familiar with HTML already. For me, it was like, oh, that's nice. It's not like I would have known how to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what was going on with the other app.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was looking at what Cruz was doing on ERP and what HTML was generating. That's how I was able to kind of change some stuff.
Right.
I would just look up ERP. How do you do this from an ERP that is HTML?
Right.
But yeah, I feel like if you don't really have a big background in HTML, you'll be kind of lost.
Yeah, these.
Because it does look like magic.
Yeah, and these embedded templating languages can be a little confusing.
They are.
That's what I'm going to call it. That's what ERB is, the embedded Ruby, or there's a lot of them. A very classic one that's been around for a long time was PHP, which is also a server-side language that you write. A lot of times you write it right into an HTML file, so it looks like HTML somewhat, but then it has some actual programming logic embedded into the file, and it can be confusing what's going on and where it's just static HTML and where it isn't.
That's interesting, because that's like for people who are, now there's quite a few people who consider themselves web developers who are basically WordPress developers, and I think that's their big skill set is largely HTML and PHP, because that's mainly what WordPress is, I think.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of these languages that operate that same way. So let me see here if I can.
Maybe we should
find a
all
good
switch over so Jared can, rather than try to.
Well,
in case anyone ever watches this video, so that
I
he's
know
not
this-
a disembodied voice.
Right.
The missing Jared.
Yes.
The wisdom off the side of the screen.
So here we go. I'll go ahead and bring up my workspace and we'll look at it just a little bit. I need to share my screen. Let's see. Probably need to make me the merge screen. How do I do that?
Like example, like
I don't know if I can do that.
Like
I might be able to do it. Hold on.
like form,
I think I can do it.
add that
I think I
label,
should be able
add
to
that
just
label.
Yeah, that was a little
Like
confusing
it's
too.
like those I know. Like, if I look at the actual application, I can see what it is because it is because it's HTML. But here, you write form 4, which
Right.
it gets generated into something in HTML.
Oh, where are you?
7.13. Well, listing 7.1.
All right. And I think I've pinpointed what the params is
So
referring to.
my
also.
only
Okay.
question is, how do you learn this? I mean, what are the like attributes?
Right. How do you learn these?
Like ERB attributes, because I mean, those get generated into HTML attributes.
Yeah.
Are you talking about things like this form,
like
or just
form
things like
for-
f.label?
A label, text field. Like if you, let's say, I don't know if you have up to that point, but if you open that page, it gets, if you see the HTML generated,
Right.
which is really useful when you're trying to do CSS or trying to style in it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I just don't know where to learn this.
I think my guess is I'm about to Google Rails documentation
So
form 4.
yeah, if we pull up the form 4 bit, let's work. Yeah, and what you're working with. So it's a little hard to read, particularly because you're doing this embedded Ruby bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes it not necessarily as easy as it would be if you were reading it just as straight Ruby, or if you were reading just straight HTML. But the key here is the form 4 is the method.
It's a method. Okay.
Just like any other method that we call inside of Rails. This one's a Rails method. And it takes this user and operates on it with the form block here. So this is like I say, the syntax is a little weird, but this is a block that it passed in, right?
Yeah.
And this is the end of the block. And so the form 4 is operating across that. The F is pointing to the form itself, or the form object that it also passes in.
Right.
And then these are just the different methods that exist on it.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me, just thinking about the process of learning this. What's interesting to me is, I would think the key thing that we need to take out of this, the one thing we can't forget from having done this, is that there is a form 4 method, or even not even that, just that there is a way to do it in Rails to create forms, and just to remember to go back and look for it. I mean, it's not even
Right.
not even like certainly not necessarily remembering the format of f.label and how it all works, but as long as you remember that there is something like form 4 and can go back and find it, then you can go back and basically plug it in like a template next time. My concern is that I would actually forget that you could use this form _4.
I'll definitely be coming back towards this tutorial, just looking at stuff.
Right. Yeah, and you just won't remember everything that's on them. But so it looks like what it does here is this form 4 will take the person, or whatever this is. In this case, it's saying a person from a people controller, but this will be your sort of object that you're going to work in the context of, and then this F will continue to be your form. So if we go down here and look for label, we'll look at that method on it in just a moment. But label is going to take the, let me see here, returns a label post title.
Mm. That makes more sense. So it automatically
It's taking the title.
yeah, you can add the title and I guess an attribute.
Here's what it's being passed in as. I think these posts, by the way, are what are implicit, but so it takes the title and that's what the first name is. Is the title, I believe. Just a moment. Post. And a text field here. 1 second. Yeah.
It looks like it pretty much generates different types of attributes. Like if you pass it more than 2 parameters, it makes. Isn't that what it's saying?
Well, this is all a little subtle, but essentially what it's doing is it's assigning this object to the template, this person object. So you have to have an instance of something that you're assigning to it. And then it's going to be operating on that with these other methods. So like the F label, it's going to be operating on this person, although it doesn't really do anything to the person. It's just then getting the title for the label. In this case, that title's first name. The text field, though, is different because this one is going to be when you post, it's populating with the first name of your object, but that also is going to, since it's a text field and it's labeled with this for your label, then when you do your actual submit, it's going to set those properties to those names, the label names, when you actually submit them. So it is a little strange. Where's the submit here? It should be on here, right? Maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'd think that would be explained because it's at the submit stage that it's actually generating the post
data. But the browser is what's doing it at that point. So I guess right,
but we have to know what's posted.
Well, so I guess the submit doesn't actually, it doesn't have to have anything explicitly listed in here because you're not, all the submit's doing ultimately is generating the HTML line, which is pretty simple. So if we go up to this and we look at what we're doing here, it's just generating a submit input.
So, okay, yeah. So submit is generating that input tag, HTML tag.
Yeah, submit should be generating this input HTML tag. The form bit is essentially wrapping it in a form. Submit. When you have a type submit on a web page as an input inside of a form, then what it will do is capture all of the other inputs in that form. So here we have this authenticity token, this hidden one. This must be some Rails specific work going on with this form to make sure that you're submitting the correct information. Then you've got your person first name input field and your person last name input field. And so submit will just capture the values from each one of those using the, I believe it is the name that it sends it back as in the actual post request back to the server. So submit itself, I guess, this doesn't take any arguments, but these, whenever you're working with these syntaxes, they can get sort of confusing. So one of the key things is to try and look at them.
Because this other submit has actually, it also has a class which will, I guess it will generate a class HTML attribute with that,
Yeah,
right?
but that's, I don't think that that is part of the submit. I think that's, I have to look. I think that's part of just the ERB template itself.
Okay.
And I haven't looked at exactly the syntax of an ERB template. Let me see here. Yeah, this is what I want. It should be. Yeah, I'll have to look at that, but that should be part of, essentially that's part of the ERB template itself, not necessarily the f.submit. I think all f.submit is doing is sort of telling it what elements, what HTML elements to return. And then these are just extra arguments to the ERB template of properties to apply to the template.
What was that website that you went to? The other
I don't know. This one?
Yeah.
This is it's just the
Ruby
Rails API
Okay.
documentation.
Alright, so it's in there.
A lot of times this stuff is going to be pretty hard to understand at first because they're going to use a lot of very generic information at the top level. So a lot of times it's very useful to just jump straight to the examples if you're looking for how some of this stuff works.
Yeah, definitely helps.
Rondell, any other questions? I got my questions lined up too, but
He's waiting.
I'm just trying to give you guys a chance.
I guess it's more sort of programs, but that foreign thing was definitely one of them. I'm looking at something now. I found on the internet. I'll probably read this tonight.
Yeah, I was struggling a little bit just to figure. I mean, the way I looked at the forms thing, what I really felt like I wanted to know is, so I know we want the form to take in the parameters that a user, the attributes a user must have. And I was just trying to understand how Rails, how we were asking it to, how we were telling Rails or which parameter, like what input went with which attribute, how to make sure that it was all lined up.
I'd make sure that it was all lined up.
Yeah.
If you go down, I think listing 7.15, it has the HTML generator for that listing.
Right.
It wouldn't take too far. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I don't think that there's anything explicit in or anything implicit in Rails that is helping it do any of the mapping to know that, for example, your form has all of the attributes that you need to set for that user.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm pretty confident that there's a gem that you could use to just generate a form off of something
Right.
and have it populate it.
Right.
But
Thanks.
I don't think when you're working with it this way and using just the form for, I don't think this has any real knowledge of all of the properties of your user that could need input fields. Instead, basically all you're doing is when you pass in this user bit
Right.
here, which will be set when this form gets generated for a specific user that your code is calling down into.
Right.
Then it'll use that user as the context for the rest of the form that you're working inside of when you're working inside of it.
Right.
So then your names and emails, everything else is going to be working off of this user context that you've already passed into it.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
I found the submit and I found some of the other stuff real fast while I'm talking there. And it does look like those things do take. There's not some ERB magic or something going on. These form arguments like f dot submit after their whatever arguments they have defined on them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go look at that label one again. You can see the object name, method. Here's what you need to work on. But then key part is they can take options afterwards. So that's just a hash of any additional options, and then it processes those as needed. Like month field here, it's a little more explicit.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay.
And then it works with those other options. I'm guessing this. I'd have to go look at the full hierarchy,
Yeah.
but these form helpers or this form helper that gets returned, it inherits, I'm sure, from some other helpers underneath that then process things like the class and the ID and all of those attributes. So just pass down those options to whatever it's inheriting from, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so one, I guess, fairly basic question that might help me understand then following up on that is, so let's see, we are in our views under users in new.html.erb. So I guess one thing that is, yeah, so my question then is, so then would there be any downside? So we've got a little bit of, actually we don't, would there have been any downside if you were just much more comfortable in HTML to just have this be new.html and just have this entire thing be an HTML file?
What you're looking at right now, the new.html.erb.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely some downside to it. Specifically, what's going on with this one? So The downside wouldn't necessarily. Sorry. The downside wouldn't necessarily be that the HTML would look any different. In fact, the HTML would be probably just as easy to create, if not even a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about all the extra work that you're doing. All the extra work that you're doing along these form bits to create them and set them up, because you could just set those forms statically.
Yeah.
The downside is that what's going on with this form 4, again, setting this user attribute here, is some of the Rails magic going on in the background. So
right.
there's a couple things that this can give you. Now, in this case, when you're setting an actual new user, they're not going to have any data coming from the existing model on the server that's probably going to be populating.
Right.
So even though this is a dynamically generated page with dynamic content, that content isn't really getting filled in with anything that's needed from that user.
Yeah.
Whereas if, say, it was edit user, they would need to fill that content in. But some of the magic going on is that, let me see if I can find the bit of code. They've got the user's controller. And you can create a new user. I think it had it listed up above, actually, originally.
Oh, there it is.
Which actually reminds me that I have a question. In that particular
Field.
part, I think something to come back to. I'm a little confused still as to why we now have one method that's defined, which is new, and one which is create. That seems like two different versions of the same thing to me, but I'm sure I'm missing something.
I think they explain it.
Okay. So I think part of the magic, though, that I'm getting at with that was that by using the Ruby code and having it hooked up to a user on the back end and populating it with all that, then when it comes back, I think it's already going to be hooked up with that user correctly. I think part of that comes from this authenticity token work that they're doing to make sure that some stuff is correct. No, okay, that's for CS. Cross-site request forgery.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it is possible to not necessarily use the dynamic one. You would just have to map it to a user when you go to create one later.
I think aren't we using ERB files? Well, dynamic pages.
We are.
So it doesn't load all the HTML, but it only loads that part of the page.
We could still do that even with static HTML template portions. I mean, Rails would be doing the magic on the back end to give you just that portion. But your template, a template file doesn't have to contain embedded Ruby. It could be just static content. Without any embedded Ruby, in Rails will still just return that portion of the static content without any Ruby in it whatsoever. Small. I'm trying to just map this. If I could only have gotten through this chapter. This is a result of me not being very familiar with the Ruby conventions for this stuff.
Yeah.
What do you have create? Do you have it?
So if you go to the controller, the user's controller, we started out when we first got started.
Oh, define new.
Yeah,
I haven't done the create file. Chapter 7, maybe? Chapter 6.
Yeah, so you're going to be adding a few of them still. but so he defines a show method so to allow users to have like a page for each user.
Profile.
Yeah, profile page. And then he already had the define new. In chapter 6, that's still basically just a placeholder because it doesn't even allow you to create. It doesn't what's the word? Instantiate a new user with at user equals user.new. Then I guess what the difference is between new and create is new is creating a new instance and create is saving that instance to the database.
Isn't it? If you say the user something, whatever you else render new.
Right. So that what this code is doing is so if at user.save, so the result of that will be true if it succeeds at saving it, but if it violates some of the validations, it'll be false. So then it'll go to the else, and it will render a new version of the the sign up page, and then it goes, and then elsewhere in the views he goes through and actually creates a helper file in chapter 7 for error messages to tell you like what was wrong with the sign up page.
Okay.
Sorry.
Rondell, I have a quick question for you since you're further than I am. At chapter 7.1.3, he briefly introduces debugger. And he says you just need to add this line debugger to your code after, but then he has you go back and delete it again afterwards. Do you remember if you were able to do that?
If I did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did all that.
Because for me, for some reason, when I go in and I write debugger in that line, I'll show you, it immediately gets my text editor strikes it.
Try it real quick if you can.
Are you using Cloud 9?
Yeah. It was. I haven't seen anything like it before. I mean,
try it really quick.
So that was in my. That's right. No, where was that? So it is in my user's controller. Yeah. The second I hit finish the word debugger, it immediately.
But it doesn't throw an error. It kind of just highlights it.
No,
when it
but
throws an error, I think it's when you have something here.
Right. But it doesn't do anything.
Even after you save it, it still has a strike through.
As soon as I go debugger, can't do that. Apparently.
Are you running your code right now?
Yeah.
You running a server?
I think I still am. Yeah, in this terminal. Yeah.
Okay. So it's open in the other tab?
Yeah. It is running. Where am I now?
Right? It's not that.
Yeah. Is it that guy? You got like multiple.
Oh yeah. Sorry, there's so many. Yeah.
Refresh it.
Okay.
I don't think I saved that.
Okay. Go back to the
your section here.
Let me try it on mine real fast. I don't know if that's a Cloud9 thing.
Yeah, I definitely done had the issue with my run.
Okay, so now I just saved it, and let me see. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to see after this
It
upload.
highlights it.
This is an example of a very specific question that may not be worth us looking at.
I think that's just a Cloud9.
Oh, because you're not using Cloud9.
Mm-hmm.
You're running locally.
Being the rebel.
And what section was that in, by the way?
That is
I'll just look for debugger.
7.1.3.
Yeah.
Usage control.
Yeah, and I actually can't even see. I have to go back and add a user. At the stage that I'm at, I don't have any users saved, which I guess is not hard to do.
Oh, well then, yeah, I think.
I tried to look it up to see what was going on, and the only thing I saw was that that it might sometimes do that when there's deprecated code, like outdated. It recognizes that something's outdated and doesn't allow you to do it.
What version of Rails are you running? Rails -V.
Well,
4.2.2.
Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't had, it surprised me just particularly because I have not had any, the couple times where I thought I might have an outcome that's different than expected based on his tutorial, I've always realized there was some mistake or something. It's never varied from what he
Yeah.
said.
I know what it's trying to do there.
Although actually the one thing that has varied, and I checked on Stack Overflow, and multiple people have commented, and there's this long explanation of why it is with the debugging. When you look at the message I get from the debug box is different. Contains this ivars.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
Colon at permitted. This all shows up at the bottom, which does not show up on his, and so I looked that up, and there was a long explanation about how something in more recent version had come out that somehow gets in there even though you're still running the same version of Rails.
And I have the ivars bit. Now, are you running in debug mode?
Yeah, I mean it's all in develop. Yeah, well, it's set so that in development that always shows up.
Yeah, I guess you do have that as a debug. So if that's showing up, you're in debug mode. You must be.
Yeah.
Because that debug statement wouldn't show up otherwise. Yeah. All right. That's a little weird. As for the params,
even here, doesn't it highlight it in different columns?
That just means he added it there.
so
Yeah.
let me just verify this. We've got params. hash with IVAR's action control parameters. So let me hunt down some references here. It looks like params is just Ruby's, it might be Rails, I'm not sure here, way of getting access to, it's all it is a hash. Right, we're already used to seeing these object literals or hashes or whatever. And so params is just a hash that's getting set in different instances to different values. Based the values that it's getting is different based off the type of request, type of command being issued to the controller. So Ruby's doing a little bit of magic there for you. So for example, with a GET request, and this is getting into the HTTP concept. I think it talks about it somewhere, but you've got GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE are the standard requests that are going to be issued. So GET requests, just retrieve data typically. Very rarely does a GET request shouldn't change anything on the system. So if you, maybe I'll pull up my browser window instead, but if you look at what's actually going on your laptop when, say, you request, I might do it on there.
Because the way I read it was kind of like, it kind of explains when you get like the backslashes. I think the example I seen was like somebody who made a blog post and you want to specifically get to like blog post 3.
Right.
And that backslashes and puts 3 or something like that.
So let's, it's not going to share this, is it? Because it sees it as a different window. All right. Let's try and share this then. Just share my entire screen. It'll be easier. Oh no.
You were infinitely
All right.
way back.
Yes. All right, let's try this. So if I refresh this page, and then I'll show you. Is type on here already? I think it is. Hold on. Method. All right. So for each one of these requests that's made, and this is just the simple this is just our simple default page, right? Each one of these is just a GET request right now because none of them are changing any data or requesting any data to be changed or modifying anything on the server. They're just retrieving information. So if we look at it a little closer, and what's going on is it's a GET type request, and here's the address that it's going to. And that's going back to the Rails server, which is figuring out how to process it, whatever way it needs to process it, right? And that's going through right now, because we're at the root, it's going to be going through like the application controller first, because I'm not giving it any specific type of object like user in my path. So it's not going to be looking for a controller that's connected with something else. Okay. So when that type of request goes through to the controller gets all of this information. What was requested, the request type, not the status code, that's something that comes back. Actually gets more. Here's everything that it sends along with it. It also sends accept information, all this cookie information, all this user agent information. So a whole bunch of information goes to the actual server when it makes this request. And that server, Rails, by default, is taking, for a GET request, this URL and chopping it up into and setting values on the params based off this URL. So typically, Let me see here. I think it's at the top of this chapter. More or less. There's the param.
So is params just? Is it a way to just get specific parts of the entire thing? Is that kind of?
Yeah, well, the params is just it's a hash, just like any of the other ones we're familiar with seeing. So we're used to seeing them. I mean, in everything that we're working with, right? That's what the user is. You've got your user properties afterwards for your hash values. Let me hide this. A little larger. We'll see. Rail C dash sandbox. All right. And it's going to yell at me because I didn't set all my required stuff, did I? All right. What are my required properties again? Have name. Oh, you know what? Forget it. I don't even need to go through this. Let's just write one. Just write a literal. Like we're used to seeing these hashes in some respect. User, I can set some properties. Let's see if this works. Didn't like something. Oh, not what I did wrong.
Just the fact there's no comma after.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure this is no problem.
Yeah. I have a tendency. I've had errors multiple times because I'm so used to, like, in writing, putting my commas often inside the quotation mark, which obviously causes a problem. Instead of breaking it up, it just puts a comma at the end of your string, like at the end of your name.
Yeah, I've done that a lot. So this is just a hash too. And this is no different than what we're getting back with the params. The difference is just setting the name of that hash as params. The name of this one I just set to user.
Mm.
So I can do user name.
No nerd demo name. Okay.
And get back Jared. Or user email and get back a value. The magic part of what's going on with the params is that Rails itself is automatically setting that params.
Can you do that by the index number too? What you just did?
The index.
The one that automatically.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
What do you mean?
You know, you automatically store the index of the user.
Like this.
Well, you can. Sorry, actually, you can pull up by.
Well, I didn't actually create a correct user here.
Okay.
Yeah, had he done create.
Here, I can add some more. Let's do what is it? Password equals foobar, right? It's not happy with me. Oh. Hold on. This is me not knowing Ruby syntax very well. Will this work? And what's the other one? Confirm password?
Password underscore confirmation.
Is it?
Is that right?
That's like chapter 7, right?
That's right at the end of chapter 6. It talks about the. Let me go back here.
Yes, password underscore confirmation.
All right. It's password underscore confirmation. Yep. That's what it was. Okay, so now I have a user, and this is just a hash. But I should now, let's see if this works. I don't know if this will take an argument. Because I don't have it set up to take one, right?
That's interesting. So you've already said it all. And now you want to make that.
Let me try it this way. That still blew up. Not happy. Am I missing something else?
I mean, if you wanted to actually save it, like you can do user.create and start from scratch and put all that stuff in.
Oh, it's like complaining that it can't load bcrypt or something. Weird. Anyways, so that's ultimately what's going on with this params. But like I said, I believe it's just sort of setting those by default for you. So the Rails server itself, when it gets back one of these HTTP requests, looks at the type of request it is, and then looks at the information that it wants based off that type of request by default. So for a GET request, it's going to look at the URL that it's requesting, and then it's going to set some params off of that. And those params are going to be based off of convention by default of how Rails expects those parameters. So for example, you have a user controller, and if you do /users/1, I believe the convention would be, oh, I expect that to be
User ID 1.
the ID of the user.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's Jared's probably already explained it better, but there's a Stack Overflow question where someone basically asked, they asked, could anyone explain params in Rails controller, where they come from and what they're referencing? And yeah, they give this pretty short
Can you
explanation.
link that in
I would think it was a better explanation than me, because I'm trying to back into it from other stuff. But then it looks like the thing that threw me and the thing that's interesting is it looks like Rails it bases it off the type of request that you're getting back. So that might be part of what's confusing with what it does as well. So for example, on a post request, I believe that it's making, when it's creating the new user, do we know? When it's a post method. So when it's making that post request, instead of the params being based off of the URL, there might be some of that, but it looks like it's pulling a lot of the params off of the form data that's returned by the post request. So it's looking at this form data that's being sent back by the browser in the form, and it's generating the params values off of that. And that's where these input fields that were set up earlier in our form and actually ended up getting set on the actual form. Like you have this user name that happened as a result of saying in that form 4 that our context is a user, and then the property for this is name. So when Rails gets back the form for this, and it's got user name as the name with a value of some kind, it then sets the param. But instead of just setting a property of user brackets name, it treats this portion as a hash inside of a hash with this. So you'll have user, and then inside of that, you'll have a name, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, and that's where this Stack Overflow is saying, yeah, that's another way of saying what they're saying here, where it says in HTTP/HTML, the params are really just a series of key value pairs where the key and the value are strings. But Ruby on Rails has a special syntax for making the params be a hash with hashes inside.
Right. It's doing some special processing once it gets it back to figure out what those values are going to be. And I'm sure I wouldn't doubt that it actually gets all the params in that params, everything like you saw when I was on here. No, I don't know if it'll flip back over to it, but I had showed my computer's going nuts. Here, come on. There we go. All right, fix it.
Almost had to cut you loose.
Yeah. I must have closed it. But I wouldn't doubt that it gets back all the actual values in the params, and you're only seeing the ones that, or you're accessing the ones that it sets to specific values. You're just not working with all the other properties of that.
Can I ask a couple other sort of specific questions? One really specific one on chapter 7.1.3. Yes. Oops. Yeah, so just using actually, sorry, just on the, if you go to our app and you look at, I think it's any of the views, but we'll look specifically at the new.users new.html.erb, but I think it could be any of them. At the top, it says we've got the embedded Ruby that says provide title sign up, and then underneath it's got a header that's sign up. What's the purpose of the embedded Ruby at the top is not doing nothing about it is being shown to the user, right?
Well, I think it is. You're just not seeing it.
That one, it's what's generating the title you picked.
Yeah, that's the one being used by.
Ah, yeah, okay. It's
So-
being used to
Yeah. So let's go back.
to show in the tab.
We did that a couple chapters ago. So we go and look at our header.
Mhm.
So here we have, I think it's in the header. Oh, no. It's in the application. So here we have a title.
Yep.
And this, I can make this larger at least. All right. We have a title, and for the title, it's grabbing the full title method, and the full title is rendering and it's yielding to this title symbol or whatever, this title string.
Right.
So that's what you're setting in there. Just like the home page. Well, maybe the home doesn't do it. Okay, the help page does. this is being used. The provide is another Ruby or a Rails bit,
Yeah.
and saying I'm providing for this title symbol the value of help.
Yeah.
So then the application, when it checks to render the full title, will say, oh, my value has changed for this. I better update my title on my actual page. Now, this title is in the head of the HTML, so no, it's not directly visible on the page.
Right.
But the title of an HTML page is typically, well, that's
The tab.
weird, is typically what shows up as the title of the tab.
Yeah.
Make this back.
Yeah, I feel like I understood this at the time, but then what else is it? Like, what is full title do? Where's full title defined?
It's
I think full title is,
we wrote it, right. We wrote a method with an if statement.
Yeah, no. Anyway, I should
It's
go.
It's on helpers. It's on app helpers, application helper,
there we go.
and we
Yeah.
define full title there.
There we go. Yeah, because that was definitely not the naming type that they would use in Ruby or Rails. So
Oh, and it's just so it's just to create a default if we don't name it.
well, and also to give it this base. So it takes a base title, and otherwise it gives your page title, then
Choose a base.
a pipe,
Oh,
and then your
gotcha.
base title after the pipe.
Is that kind of like how some pages have the same name but they have the semicolon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all it's doing is it's just doing some string concatenation here to combine the page title that we're providing. And you can see full title says the page title is the first argument that it's taking. And then it just takes that page title, combines it with pipe and some spaces, and adds in the base title.
Right.
So on any given page, full title, taking in this title as its first argument. Yeah. I was going to show you, I don't have my back end working for this, but I do have this up and running. So I went and simplified this form. This is a page with just a form. I got rid of it's got some of the bootstrap styling, but it doesn't have any Ruby code. I just cut and pasted the output of their form into this. So we'd be able to see autofill. Something went wrong, yeah, because I don't have any support for you. But this is a great example of seeing what the browser actually sends across with this form. Here's everything that came back, but here's the form data that it sent across. This is the content that it is turning into the hash or the params arguments. And what you can see is for like the username, again, I can make it larger, but we'll get rid of some of this stuff. You can see that the username, it's not broken out.
They're showing us your password.
Yeah. It's not broken out in a nice structure.
Right.
And the email is not broken out in a nice structure. It still has that same string that is on the form, because there's none of the Ruby code sitting on the client, the person's browser, to convert that.
Right.
So it gets back this form data, and then the Rails server converts it into the hash of params that it's used to working with. This is just a convention of how to send it back and have Rails convert it over to a different type of structure, where first it'll be a user, and then a user will have a name and email and password, etc. Yep. So much secure password.
Yeah.
Not so secure.
Not so secure.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna read up some more on these params. Yeah, that'll be my nightly read.
That's, yeah. I think it's Yeah, I think this is the same Stack Overflow you were on.
Yeah, that's the one.
And it's just being processed by. So it's just setting some values following convention by default. I'll bet you can, if you choose to, you can name them and set them to specific types of values as you go through. I mean, that's sort of what you're doing with all this stuff is you're setting it to specific values. Whereas, for example, on the GET request with the ID, it's following a convention by default, right? Because I haven't gotten there in the code, but I don't think anyone specified anywhere in the code that path, like it's a user ID. I think that's just following convention.
Right.
Yep.
But if you want to have a different structure for that, you can change it, I'm sure. You just have to actually specify what that path would look like and what those params end up being when they come back.
Yeah, I was just more so confused about it because you go further through chapter 7, he keeps talking about params. So I got stumped at the beginning. So going forward, I was kind of thrown off when he keeps referencing it.
Right. Yeah, I think it's confusing because there's magic. There's magic in multiple places. Because you look at like this user's controller and you're showing a user and you say, where did this params even come from? It's not specified anywhere. I don't have it here. I don't have it on, I never set to params property. So how did I get it? And how is this show method able to reference this params without having to do anything else? And I mean, the reason is because it's part of the application controller, it's part of the Rails bit.
Gotcha.
Moving on down, that it's passing in certain arguments when the controller functions get called. And certain controller functions are getting called by default based off of the convention of what Rails expects to call in certain situations.
Gotcha.
As well.
I don't trust magic. It's too good to be true.
It is, yeah.
I think that's why I was second guessing it because I was like, hold on.
There it is.
It is taking, I mean, there's a lot of magic that goes on behind the scenes. But I'll have to go through this to get a better feel for how they're doing some of that. Most of the languages I've worked with when I'm doing this stuff, some of them have had the simplicity. There's some things that are great about Ruby, and some of it, or Rails, some of it is that it's got default approaches to some of this. But a lot of the ones I've worked with haven't necessarily had that simplicity already built into them on the back end as just an automatic. We're going to assume that it follows this model. Right. And so instead, you tend to have to write out the functions on the back end that say, when I make or get a GET request for a URL that looks like this, and you might have to structure what it looks like. Well, this portion of it is the username, and this portion of it, or a user ID, and this portion of it is the request that they're looking for, the piece of information, and you might have to actually write that out yourself.
Gotcha. So it's usually more work with a different language.
It depends on the framework you're working with.
Oh,
it depends on whether or not it includes, one of the big things that Rails provides is the concept of convention. They call it convention over configuration, which means there's a lot of decisions that have already been made as the default approach for stuff to work a certain way. So instead of having to make each one of those decisions yourself, like go, okay, how do we get an individual user? Ruby already, or Rails already has the convention of, oh, you get an individual user by going /users/1, and that gives you a user based off their ID. And that's part of the convention for it. I mean, you could have that URL be whatever you want it to be, but you would have to write a backend that matches it. Rails has a whole bunch of these conventions already built into it, which means that you don't have to try and make those decisions. And one of the big benefits there is it's from a lot of people who have a lot of experience writing web software. So a lot of the convention that they have, you're probably going to have to change it eventually, but it's a really great place to start from so that you don't spend forever debating what the best way to make a path is, or you don't do it in a incorrect way that's going to hurt you in the long run.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like they're saying, I'll push you along just so you don't get caught up.
Right.
Okay.
So you don't get caught up, and so it's just hopefully faster. So that especially if you're putting something together real fast, well, I don't want to rewrite this code again for another application to get me my list of users and to be able to select an individual one. I've done that for every application that I've written. So instead, Rails already has some defaults, and I don't have to write any of that code because it's built into it to give me certain content back automatically.
That's definitely good to know.
For an app like this, how much time are you saving by doing it in Rails? Writing the backend instead of doing, like, let's say you would use JavaScript, maybe.
Well, you probably wouldn't use JavaScript on the back end.
I mean,
you
like
could.
Node.js or.
Node.js.
Like something like that.
I would say, there's frameworks that are about the same on all the languages, and it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're writing something that follows a very common pattern like this, where you're going to have a set of users, they're going to have some data, they're going to have some structure around it, then using something like Rails or Node has common frameworks. There's Express, although Express is more low level as a web server.
Mm-hmm.
But there's things like something called Strong Loop that gives you some of this default behavior as well when you create a backend on Node. So all of them have something like that, and you save a lot of time when you're getting started on stuff by having those defaults, but it can get harder to make changes to them as well later on if you need to customize it or follow a different path. So it's usually a set of trade-offs. It's a lot faster to get started when you're doing something like this than if you were trying to write all of this by hand.
Okay.
And it's not that it's necessarily a lot of complicated code all the time, but it's just a lot of scaffolding, a lot of code that you'd be writing that looks the same, that looks very repetitive, that is very similar to stuff that you've written other times and just takes time, and all code that you write is error prone. So the more of that scaffolding you have to write, the more you have to test, and you're going to have problems with it, even if it's something that you've done repeatedly, and you're going to have issues with that. But so using something like Rails, I think some of the biggest advantages, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. It's really useful to build stuff quickly. It's really useful for prototyping. It's really useful for getting started with stuff. And for me personally, some of the big benefits are it's really useful to end my own bike shedding. Bike shedding is a term in programming of spending a whole bunch of time on something that doesn't matter. Right. And so for me, it's very easy to bike shed and spend a ton of time debating what should my URL structure be when I'm making a request for users, and try and debate back. I could spend hours debating back and forth between a couple different approaches, whereas if I have something that has some convention already built into it, usually not going to fight it unless I have a real reason to do that, and it just stops that bike shedding. I don't have to make that decision at all. So that's another benefit for some people. At least for me, that can be a big benefit.
Right.
Cool. We're at 8. I feel like I didn't do a good job answering most of the questions tonight. So
No, actually,
I'm looking more forward to today. I gotta work Thursday. Shoot.
oh no.
Yeah. That's gonna probably be the class I need to be in. Because by then, Jared, you'll be all caught up in this program stuff.
should be. Yeah, it's just my lack of the Ruby stuff in them.
If you have questions, you can always post them, and then he can answer them, and you can watch the video.
Well,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I could do a better job answering asynchronously.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
On
Or
Slack.
just on Slack.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna stop this wonderful video. All right, everybody. Thank you to Jedi Jared, aka Obi-Wan, aka the wise one, aka
JJ.
JJ.
I didn't really talk about CSS and stuff.
Oh yeah, I didn't even get that.